What is up, bros? Josh here. In today's video, we're going over the Tier 6 currently work in progress tech tree battleship, the Izmail. Now, to stand out in Tier 6, we all know Tier 6 is a very stacked tier, not only with tech tree ships and premium battleships. To stand out, it's going to be something that's pretty special, and I think the Izmail, it definitely is that. Now, let's dive into some stats. We'll talk about some pluses and minuses of this ship and my thoughts on what will happen with this ship. The stats itself, 55,900. That is on the higher end of this health pool, a very decent health pool, and it will even help you even up tier a little bit. Now, the armor layout, this is something I've talked with other CCs and gotten some interesting feedback. Now, I have not had the same experience as a lot of other CCs have. That doesn't mean that what I have gone through is what's going to happen every game, but I think I have an idea of what's going on with this ship specifically. A lot of other CCs have gone through and talked about how the armor on this is paper. Now, personally, I've only had 1 or 2 situations in all of my games. I think I've played between around 15 games with this ship. I've only had 2 situations where I was getting what would be considered this quote-unquote paper armor. And that is with, if you look at this armor layout, it's only 25mm plating. But if you look at the armor cutouts themselves, it's actually a very unique cutout. These, I think, is causing some of the problems. This, and really the only time I was ever getting pretty big citadels is when I was taking shots from the angle, and I was probably giving up too much broadside, taking shots from behind. And there was one time where I took a shot where, let's say, the ship was... I think the ship was like right here, and I was showing a bit more broadside. I think a lot of this paper armor feel has to do with these severe cutouts, and as you can even see, some of that Citadel deck is actually exposed. So if you have the ability to overpen 25mm, which a lot of battleships will, especially getting bottom tiered, you could definitely bust through this and then bust through that Citadel armor. I imagine that's what has to do with that. These unique cutouts of this ship are something we haven't really seen to this extent, in my opinion. So it's probably has to do with these giving a kind of a good 90-degree angle to kind of shoot. But the majority of the time, I was kind of just bow in with my front gun and then swinging the ass out once they've shot, and it felt pretty dang tanky to me. So I haven't experienced the paperness that everyone else has, that I've talked to, has experienced. I found the ship to be pretty tanky, but of course, this is something I will watch as the ship goes on and as we test it more and more, because I don't think this is going to be the final version. Now, people have asked me what this plays like. Well, if you've ever noticed, if you've ever played the October Revolution, the Tier 5 premium ship, you can also buy it for coal. It's basically that on steroids. The guns themselves actually feel a tad more like the Fuso when you're playing it. Outside, even your buffed range, again, the Russian battleships have a buffed accuracy within 12 kilometers. They get quote-unquote cruiser style accuracy, and inside that they get the cruiser, sorry, outside they get quote-unquote worse battleship dispersion, but outside the 12 kilometers it felt almost like a Fuso. Now, I will show you an example of the dispersion differences here. You can check it out, and against some Pensacola's. So here we are in the training room with the Izmail. So of course, with all the other Russian ships, I'm going to show you a comparison of with the accuracy buff and without. Remember, that is 12 kilometers. So we have some friendly Pensacola's lining up, and outside of the kilometer range is 12. Now, one thing I did notice when I was playing the Izmail is its dispersion without the buff is pretty damn good anyways. So obviously without, or outside of the buff, outside of that 12 kilometers, we'll shoot at the Pensacola broadside. And as you can see, it's still pretty damn good. Yeah, so this is something, obviously we get a 5 overpens, but as you can see, it is still very, very punishing. Outside of that kilometer, the 12-kilometer buff, we even do another salvo, because I mean, come on, broadside, we can only have that dispersion be so much. But that's one thing I noticed more with the Tier 5 and the Tier 6 is that 12-kilometer range tends to just be too much when it comes to the amount of time you're spent in that range. I think something we would love to see, so we'll do another salvo at that, giving outside dispersion again outside the 12-kilometer buff, still pretty damn good. I would consider that pretty dang solid. So there's the double Citadel outside. So still, of course, 356s will punish all kinds of cruisers, even top tier, bottom tier, whatever you are. And then, of course, when you get within that 12-kilometer range, you're even shooting a better dispersion than that. So we will switch to the 8-kilometer one, and once it reloads, we will show a comparison there. And again, this is something that I could see the 8-kilometer, or the Tier 5 maybe getting changed to 8 kilometers, and the Tier 6 getting changed to maybe 10. But as you can see, I mean, it's just it's so good. It's still so good, and of course you're just going to obliterate everything. The tier 6 though is something that I've noticed that the dispersion is just pretty damn good regardless of where you are. And sometimes it almost didn't even seem like there was a difference in the dispersion outside of the 12 kilometers and within. I just feel like that 12 kilometers is probably still a tad too much. That's what my biggest grief with all of these battleships is. It's almost just too much on some of these lower tiers because you're permanently getting that buff. Again, we'll shoot one more, and I wonder if because of these are at a slight angle, I'm not quite getting the depth strikes as I was expecting to be, but still very punishing, whether outside, inside, or in between that 12 kilometer range. Now, getting back to the stats itself, 4 sets of 356 millimeter shells at a 33 second reload, 823 meter per second. I didn't really test the HE that much because it wasn't really needed. The AP is so rewarding when it comes to these Russian battleships that you almost shoot that exclusively, even against destroyers. 48 seconds, that is with extra marksmanship, so almost 50 seconds with extra marksmanship on the turret, so they are a tad slow, and since these are not 360 degree turrets, you do have to be careful of which way they are pointing. Main armament, 17 kilometers, you'll be using that, but again, the majority of your game will hopefully be a tad more aggressive as you'll be pushing in using that buff to the actual ship itself. AA defense is pretty dang high on this, but again, let's look at my captain. And of course, this is my build I normally run on test ships. I tend to get focused a tad more because it's kill the work in progress ship. So I run BFT, AFT. Probably not what I would run on a finalized build. I'd probably switch BFT out for superintendent and then AFT out for maybe fire prevention because of the lack of repairs when it comes to the ship, or the limited amount of repairs. But since it is a test ship, you do get focused. But again, turret traverse based off extra marksmanship. Again, if you can pick up one of the premium captains in the arsenal as well as the other ones, definitely recommend that because of the buffs to preventive maintenance, extra marksmanship, and the high alert if you want to check those out for other captain builds. For the modules themselves, I'll show you really quick and we'll get back to the stats. Of course, running premium on both of these, again, superintendent would give you a 4th heal and a 5th repair. Once you're out of these, you are out of them. For everything else, though, I would probably drop AA mod 1 and then pick up aiming system, but really you're not really going to need it in the end, so AA isn't that terrible because outside that range, it doesn't quite feel like bad battleship dispersion. It feels like a Fuso almost, and inside of 12 you don't need this, you won't even notice it. But so AA isn't too terrible, but aiming armament mod 1, we're going with the damage control system mod 1, and then of course picking up this with battleship, the Russian battleship, you tend to stack a tad more on survivability for both modules and captain skills. Back to the stats though, maneuverability on the ship, 28.5 knots, not too bad for a tier 6, 830 millimeter on the turning radius, rudder shift 12 seconds, and then a detection of 13.3. Let's dive into some gameplay with the Izmail and just show how punishing the ship can be. Again, 12 shells with quote-unquote cruiser style accuracy can be absolutely punishing, assuming you get some good matchmaking. Now here you are in game with the Izmail, and we are top tier. Now I know a lot of people talk about how do these ships do at bottom tier, how do they do at bottom tier. Pretty much every tier 6 kind of struggles at bottom tier. This one will definitely have some problems at bottom tier, but I feel like the range itself at max range is still pretty good. But I mean, there's not really a tier 6 battleship that is completely overpowered at bottom tier, or you know, vice versa. They all have pen value problems, they all have armor problems. So this is something I wanted to show how quick of work you can really make when it comes to this, and using this dispersion is something I think Wargame is going to have to look at throughout all of these ships. I think some of them are kind of balanced, but when you bring in this 12 kilometer magic value that you get this accuracy buff, that's when I feel like you have some trouble with the potential balance of these ships, especially when it comes to low tier. Mainly the ones I'm really worried about are the tier 5 and the tier 6, because of the range that you're always, because of the size of the maps, you're almost always within those 12 kilometer range, especially at tier 5. Tier 6 though, you're in that range a lot. I mean, we just spawned in and this person is only a few kilometers outside of my cruiser level dispersion. So and as you see right there, we don't even have our cruiser level dispersion buff, and we're getting pretty dang good dispersion. Now of course I shoot that low, I didn't know what was going on. I don't know why I missed that, but I mean, what, we're 2 minutes in and 2 ships are already within our 12 kilometer range. This is one of the biggest things I think I have a problem with this ship, is I feel like it's just too much of a buff for the low tier ships. Tier 5 especially I think would be more balanced around 8 kilometers for that buff. I feel like that's more fair. But the tier 6, I mean, already with that range, he was outside 12 kilometers, but you're still getting that and From Russia with Love. It seems a little too much for these lower tiers, and really I just think it's something that you could have. It's just too much of an impact in every 33 seconds, not including Adrenaline Rush. This is the the amount of impact you can have. Now, even with something that is another tier 6 battleship like a Fuso, New Mexico, all these other good tier 6 ships, even at low tiers or low range, you can still get bracketing, random dispersion, stuff like that. But this, you're just absolutely shooting lasers. Now, that's up to you, and if your aim is better than mine, because that was a terrible first salvo. But still, getting that dispersion is pretty insane, and to get it every 33 seconds is pretty nuts. Now, again, we are taking a little bit extra damage there. I do want to kind of point that out, but we're not taking those big hits that other people were kind of saying. But if you look, I kind of have almost half the combat map within my dispersion buff, and I feel like that's just a tad too much. I really do. I mean, to shoot that at something is so close, but again, my aim is terrible, so we would have been able to do a lot more damage. So one thing you tend to do with these Russian battleships is you tend to you tend to tank something in front of you and shoot something off to the side. You'll see me do that a lot. Also, the Russian battleship is probably the line that's punished the most from broadside, so I thought I was going to take a pretty big hit here, but in the end, I got lucky because the person was on reload. But you can see, even though something at 7 kilometers in front of me, I am looking at elsewhere. Instantly, this emerald gets into my buff range, and this is something that I know I can just obliterate off the planet. And so, when you get the opportunity, you're going to use that quote-unquote cruiser-like dispersion and send them back to port. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So, what, 4 salvos, 2 kills already, and it just keeps on coming, trust me. Or maybe 5, whatever we're at right now. But this is my biggest thing. I think the ship itself doesn't quite see the negative part of this outside 12 kilometers having quote-unquote worse battleship dispersion. This one, I felt like even without the buff would still be a decent tier 6 battleship. It's relatively unique, and those 356s are still going to overmatch a lot of battleships and still get tons of pen. So in goes that, in goes our 3rd kill. Now maybe, I know we did some damage to it, but I mean, against like a Dunkirk, like sorry Dunkirk, you're still a Dunkirk, but there's nothing this guy's really going to be able to do against me as long as I'm angling. So this ship though is an absolute beast. Again, I didn't experience this paper armor that other CCs were talking about, so I can only kind of go off of what I'm saying. Again, something at 9 kilometers in front of me, I'm tanking that, and I'm going to shoot at something else and put as much damage as I can into these destroyers or into another ship off to the side, because you want to use that as effectively as possible and against destroyers. I think I ended up missing the shot though, because I thought he was injured for a tad, but still, these ships are an absolute terror for DDs. Normally you maybe take a shell or 2. Sometimes you can put 7, 8 shells of your 12 into a destroyer even at range, and you'll just drop them for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10k a salvo, which is pretty nasty. I know there was one game I played when I was doing the early testing that I did, like, I think it was somewhere around, or I think I killed 3 back-to-back destroyers for like an average of like 8k a salvo. And again, of course, we're going against a Dunkirk, so we're going to aim for the guns, and down goes half of his armament. Not much you can really do. But we are going to look at that, and we're going to hang out with the Icarus right here and just take some damage. I think he ends up taking like no damage here, which is kind of nice, although we don't want to pop him because we did that in one game. So we want him to get the kill, and well, it takes 1 hit there, so not too bad. But this is the kind of damage you can do with this and this dispersion. And obviously he's extremely close, but yeah. So this ship, if it has a weakness with armor, I think it's well deserved. I feel like, although it depends maybe on what's shooting at you. Obviously, if you're going against something with a very large caliber, it's going to overmatch that 25mm plating anyway. But most of these battleships kind of just tank a lot of damage. Going against something like a West Virginia or a Mutsu or even Colorado, something like that, you're going to have some tough problems. But the thing that I really want to point out is that's outside the buff range, so it doesn't seem like there's really a drop-off. So this one, to me, again, like I said, it feels like almost a Fuso with aim hack if you get close. And that's where I feel like there's going to be some trouble. The majority of these ships, though, my balance of the ship, my fairness of these ships, tend to be around this Harry Potter magic level of 12-kilometer increased range or whatever, increased accuracy. To me, this seems like something they're really gonna have to be careful about the low tiers. I think once you get into the higher tiers, tier 7, tier 8, tier 9, tier 10, it's easier to kind of balance them around because of and that salvo right there I would consider bad, and that's not even that bad for a lot of other tier 6 battleships. So I feel like these are going to be tough to balance around that. I feel like it's too much power in one ship's hands with how fragile a lot of ships are at these tiers. Yes, going against tier 8, you are going to have more of, more trouble, just like any tier 6 battleship would. You can play with the strongest battleship at tier 6, and you can still get penned to hell by a tier 8 battleship. That's not something I'm saying this thing is immune to, but it's very scary. I don't think they're instantly, if they released it like it is right now, which I don't think they will, and it's still work in progress, I feel like this would instantly jump into probably the scariest tier 6 battleship out there because of that 12-kilometer range. If somebody knows how to aim, you almost have no chance of avoiding shells because of the buff. Now, you do get punished sailing broadside more than any other tier 6 battleship. I remember I was doing either the tier, I think it was the tier 6, and I got dev struck by a Colorado, or almost dev struck, basically, like, I think like 35k or whatever it was, 40k, and there was nothing I could have done, and probably I wouldn't have had the same level of punishment in a different battleship. Now, maybe I would have, but still, outside of that, it seems like there is so much reward for the real lack of risk, I guess, when it comes to this. But again, making quick work of 5 ships, there's nothing they could have done. Those cruisers obviously giving me just a split second of broadside, and we were able to just absolutely punish them. I remember chat was just kind of laughing at this. And again, so some of the things I have heard from my fellow CCs is that there is some armor issues, and probably has to do with these weird cutouts here. So maybe we'll see some change there. But I think the ship 1 is just too accurate outside in the punishment range of the quote-unquote worst battleship Dispersion. But inside, I feel like that 12-kilometer range is way too much. I mean, this guy is a third of the way across the map, and he's almost within my 12-kilometer range. So that seems a bit too rewarding to me. Although I do like getting rewarded for hitting the W key, I feel like not enough battleships do it. I feel like, again, as I've kind of talked about with the tier 5 Russian battleship, is it's too long for the low tiers. Too long of range to give a buff to battleships at those tiers. 12 kilometers is way too much for tier 5, and I feel like 12 kilometers is even too much for tier 6. I think I would like to see this at least at 10 kilometers. I would like to see the tier 5 at 8. This seems like it seems really hard to balance that level of accuracy that close because of just how much of the game you will spend within that range. Absolute monster at tier 6. Basically, the way I kind of expected is it looks like just a bigger October Revolution, but it feels like a Fuso with aimbot because it's just instant citadels everywhere. So, I mean, 12-minute game. We just took out. Yeah, I mean, just an absolute slaughter. Everything is near you is going to die, and if you can push in, keep pushing in, you're going to help your team out and just absolutely clean up. So a 12-minute game, almost 126,000 damage, 6 citadels, 5 kills, shot down some planes too. Look at that number though, almost 70 shell hits, 70 target hits for a tier 6 battleship. That's pretty dang good for such a fast game as well. So that's a number that I've seen be very high when it comes to these battleships, is the Russian battleships having a very high target hit ratio. Again, top of the team, 2000 base XP, fantastic. And there's all the damage we did. But overall, those are my thoughts on this ship comparing the outside, inside. Not really seeing that much of a drop-off when it comes to accuracy, especially around that 12-kilometer range. And just, I feel like it's just too much power for a tier 6, although I will continue to test this ship throughout and see if I can repeat that weak armor process. But to me, it felt kind of normal for what you would normally see with a lot of tier 6 battleships. But anyways, guys, that's it for me. The tier 6, currently work in progress, so stats are subject to change. Tech tree battleship for the Russian line, the tier 6, the Izmail. So anyways, guys, that's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.